Welcome to my channel. Please give this video a like and subscribe. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's get started. As the garage door clanked shut behind Samuel Kean's pickup truck, the familiar hum echoed in the space, with late afternoon sunlight filtering through the small windows. Samuel remained in the driver's seat briefly, his roughened hands still wrapped around the steering wheel, while the dashboard clock displayed 6:47 p.m. Another lengthy day at the construction site had ended. The intense summer heat had transformed the worksite into a furnace, but Samuel had stayed until every minor detail was checked and signed off. His project coordinator, Mike, had urged him an hour earlier. "We can finish the inspection tomorrow. You've been here since sunrise." But Samuel had simply responded with a calm yet firm, "Mike, what's our company motto?" With a sheepish look, Mike had repeated, "Do it right the first time." Samuel nodded. "Exactly, and that foundation pour tomorrow needs to be flawless, so we double-check everything." At 39, Samuel's face showed the weathered features of a man accustomed to hard choices and heavy burdens. His once dark hair had grayed slightly at the temples, but his broad shoulders and unwavering gaze reflected a man unafraid of hard work. The creases around his eyes had deepened over time, each one earned through countless hours of dedication to his projects and his family. He took his worn leather briefcase from the passenger seat and climbed out of the truck. The garage smelled of motor oil and freshly cut grass, a reminder to have Noah clean up after mowing the lawn the previous day. Thinking of his 14-year-old son brought a slight smile to Samuel's face. Just last weekend, they'd worked on the truck together, with Samuel teaching Noah about the importance of maintenance. "Dad," Noah had asked, handing him a wrench, "why do you always do this yourself? We could just take it to a mechanic." Samuel had slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands with a rag. "Son, some things a person needs to know how to handle themselves. It's not just about saving money, it's about understanding how things work and taking pride in keeping them running." Samuel set his briefcase on the workbench, his eyes scanning the neatly arranged tools on the pegboard wall. Each tool had its place, just as every other part of his life was organized. The set of wrenches gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Last weekend, he'd taught Beth, his 10-year-old daughter, how to change a tire. She beamed with pride when she finally tightened the lug nuts securely. "Like this, Dad?" she'd asked, concentrating as she turned the wrench. "Perfect, sweetheart. Remember, clockwise to tighten righty-tighty." Lefty-loosey. Beth had finished with a grin, showing off the gap from a recently lost tooth, a memory that filled Samuel with pride. Every extra hour spent at the construction company, every sacrificed weekend with his old college friends, was for moments like these, for his family, for his wife Anley and their kids Noah, Beth, and little 7-year-old Ellie. He leaned against the workbench, loosening his tie as he absorbed the sight of his space. This two-car garage held more than just vehicles, it held memories of 15 years of family life. Bicycles of all sizes were lined along the wall, storage boxes labeled for each season's decorations, and camping gear prepped for summer trips. Each item spoke to his family's story: the scratched helmet from Noah's first bike accident, the training wheels removed from Beth's bike last spring, the tiny pink scooter Ellie had received for her birthday. All of this, he murmured, running his hand over the smooth wood of the workbench he'd built himself. "Everything we've built becoming the project manager at Austin Commercial Construction hadn't come easily." Samuel had climbed the ranks from site supervisor, dedicating countless hours to learning the ins and outs of the business. His colleagues respected him for his commitment and loyalty to his work and family. Just last week, his boss had called him into the office. Kean Jim had said, leaning back in his chair, "We're expanding operations with new offices in Houston and Dallas." Samuel had nodded. "Yes, sir, the growth looks promising. We need someone to manage this expansion, someone who knows our values and understands how to do things right. I'm putting your name forward for regional director." The opportunity made Samuel's heart race. A promotion would mean a substantial pay increase, enough to start college funds for all 3 kids. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." As he glanced at his phone, he noticed 3 missed calls from contractors and an email about tomorrow's site inspection. They could wait. Anley would have dinner ready soon, and he'd promised Ellie he'd help with her science project tonight. Just as he approached the door leading to the kitchen, he heard hushed voices. Anley's tone, unusually quiet and almost conspiratorial, reached his ears. Samuel paused, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He doesn't need to know he's not your real dad until you're through college. He'll take care of us, she said. The words struck Samuel like a physical blow, and he pulled his hand back from the doorknob as if it had burned him. His heart pounded as he inched closer, listening carefully. But Mom whispered a voice that sounded like Noah's. "Isn't that wrong? He's always been there for us." "Keep your voice down," Anley replied with an edge Samuel had never heard before. "Listen, Samuel's a good provider, and that's what matters for now. Once we've gotten what we need, I'll take the house, his assets, and the divorce he won't see it coming. What about my baseball scholarship?" Noah asked, his voice hesitant. "Dad's been helping me train. He's not your dad," Anley interrupted sharply. "He never was. The sooner you understand that, the easier this will be." Samuel stood frozen in the garage, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as his world unraveled. The air felt suffocating, the garage too small. His fists clenched at his sides, knuckles whitening. 15 years of marriage, of building a life, of sacrificing for his family, and it had all been a lie. Forcing himself to breathe slowly, deliberately, as if he were managing a crisis at work, Samuel's mind raced through memories. Anley's occasional distant behavior, the time she diverted conversations when he mentioned Noah resembling her family, her growing interest in his work contracts and finances in the last year. Even last month's dinner conversation now took on a whole new meaning. The regional director position, Ansley had commented, slicing into her chicken. When will they make the decision? Probably in the next couple of months. Why, she shrugged, though her eyes held a calculating glint. Just thinking about our future. The kids' education isn't getting any cheaper. The usual sounds of dinner prep resumed in the kitchen, the clinking of plates, the beeping of the microwave, domestic noises that now seemed like a bitter joke to Samuel. He quietly backed away from the door, returning to his workbench, where his hands trembled as he gripped the edge, but his jaw was firm with determination. Taking out his phone, he opened an incognito browser and searched for home DNA test kits with overnight delivery. The screen's blue light illuminated his face as he selected a reputable company and ordered 4 kits. Within moments, he received a confirmation email: delivery expected by noon tomorrow. Samuel straightened his tie, forcing a calm expression. He had to play this smart. The project manager in him took over, pushing the pain aside and concentrating on the steps needed to confirm his suspicions and protect himself. The kitchen door opened, spilling warm light into the garage. "Dad," Beth's voice called. "Mom wants to know if you're coming in for dinner." Samuel turned, forcing a smile. "Just finishing up a few work emails, sweetheart. I'll be right there." Beth nodded, her ponytail bouncing as she returned inside. Samuel watched the door close, feeling the heavy thought that this little girl he loved dearly might not be his daughter at all. He took a breath and stepped into the warm, familiar kitchen. The scene before him looked picture-perfect. Ansley at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta sauce, her blonde hair tied back neatly. Noah setting the table, Beth helping Ellie into her booster seat. It looked like any other weeknight dinner they'd shared over the years. "There you are," Ansley said, turning with a smile that now felt rehearsed. "Rough day at the site." Samuel crossed the kitchen and kissed her cheek, fighting the bile that rose in his throat. "Nothing I couldn't handle." "The Cedar Park project is ahead of schedule." "That's great," honey," Ansley replied, ladling sauce over plates of pasta. "Maybe we can use that bonus you mentioned to plan the Disney World trip the kids have been asking about." She washed her hands in steady, practiced motions, as if the woman he'd overheard minutes earlier didn't exist. How many times had she deceived him like this? How many conversations had been part of her scheme? "Maybe," he replied non-committally as he took his seat at the head of the table. "We'll see how the numbers look at the end of the quarter." Dad, Noah spoke up, his gaze averted. "Could you help me practice pitching this weekend? Coach says my fastball needs work." Samuel looked at the boy's face, a face he'd loved since the day he was born, believing him to be his own. "Of course, son. Saturday morning, before it gets too hot." The word "son" tasted bitter on his tongue now. Dinner continued in the usual rhythm of conversation and the clinking of silverware. Noah talked about his upcoming baseball game, Beth complained about her math teacher, and Ellie proudly showed off the paper butterfly she'd made in art class. Samuel responded appropriately, asked the right questions, but inside he was analyzing every interaction, every gesture, for signs he should have noticed before. "Mrs. Peterson says my butterfly is the prettiest in the class," Ellie announced, holding up her colorful creation. "She says I have artistic talent. Like Mom, that's because your mother used to paint, Samuel replied mechanically, remembering the art supplies he'd bought Ansley for their 5th anniversary. The easel still stood in the corner of their bedroom, unused for years, a prop in their elaborate charade. Dad Ellie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. You promised to help with my science project tonight. Remember? We're supposed to make a model of the solar system. Samuel looked at his youngest child, or rather, the child he thought was his youngest. Her large brown eyes looked nothing like his own blue ones, a detail he recognized with a fresh wave of pain. How had he never questioned it? Of course I remember, Princess. Right after dinner. Ansley touched his arm, her fingers light on his sleeve. Are you feeling okay, Samuel? You seem distracted. He met her gaze, searching for any trace of guilt or deception in her green eyes, but there was only a practiced look of concern. 15 years of marriage, and he'd never realized how skilled an actor she was. Just thinking about tomorrow's site inspection, he lied smoothly. The city inspector's been extra thorough lately. You work too hard, she replied in a voice that sounded genuinely caring. Maybe you should take a day off soon, spend some time with the family. The irony in her words made him want to laugh bitterly, but he only nodded. Maybe you're right. After dinner, Samuel joined Ellie in the living room to help with her science project, carefully assisting her in painting styrofoam balls to represent the planets. Each time she looked up at him with complete trust and admiration, he felt his heart crack a little more. Jupiter's the biggest planet, right? Dad Ellie asked, concentrating as she painted the orange and white stripes. That's right, sweetheart, he said, helping her steady the ball. And it has a great red spot that's actually a giant storm. Like the storms you protect us from, she said innocently, looking up at him. Remember when the tornado warning came last month, and you made us all go to the basement? Samuel's throat tightened, remembering how he'd held all 3 kids close, telling them stories to drown out the howling wind outside. Ansley had brought down blankets and hot chocolate, playing the role of devoted wife and mother to perfection. That's right, he managed. That's what fathers do. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Samuel stood in the master bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at him appeared unchanged, but everything else had shifted. He turned on the faucet, letting the water run to mask any sound, as he pulled out his phone and typed a message to his sister. Marcy, need to talk. Important. Can you meet for lunch tomorrow? Her reply was quick, of course. Everything okay? You never ask for lunch meetings. Not yet, he typed back. But I need proof before I say anything more. Deleting the conversation thread, he put the phone back in his pocket. From the bedroom, he heard Ansley getting ready for bed, humming softly, a sound that made his skin crawl. I was thinking, she called out, maybe we should look into rental properties. With Austin growing so fast, it could be a good investment. We can talk about it later, Samuel cut her off, keeping his voice neutral. She was already plotting how to get more out of him. Samuel went through his evening routine on autopilot, brushing his teeth and changing into his sleep clothes. Climbing into bed, Ansley curled up beside him, just as she always did. Good night, honey, she murmured, kissing his shoulder. He resisted the urge to pull away. Good night, he replied, keeping his tone steady. Long after Ansley's breathing slowed, Samuel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, mind racing with different scenarios. The DNA test kits would arrive tomorrow. He would need to collect samples carefully, without raising any suspicions, and then wait for the results. In the darkness, he made a silent vow if the tests confirmed what he'd overheard, he would dismantle Ansley's meticulously crafted plan, piece by piece. She thought she could take everything he'd worked for, but she was about to learn exactly who she was dealing with. The digital clock on his nightstand ticked over to 2 a.m., before Samuel finally drifted into an uneasy sleep filled with broken promises and betrayal. The next morning unfolded with painful normalcy. Samuel went through his routine shower, shave, dress for work, every movement feeling mechanical, separate from the storm inside. Your tie is crooked, Ansley said, reaching up to adjust it. Her fingers brushed his neck, and it took all his self-control not to flinch. I've got it, he said, stepping back slightly. If she noticed, she didn't show it. He kissed the kids goodbye as they left for school, accepting Ellie's packed lunch with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Every interaction now felt like a performance, a necessary facade until he could confirm the truth. The DNA test kits arrived at his office just before noon in a plain brown package that gave no hint of its contents. Samuel locked his office door and carefully read through the instructions. Each kit contained cheek swabs and clear guidelines for proper sample collection. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Keene, the contractor for the Cedar Park site is on line 2. Tell him I'll call back in 10 minutes," Samuel replied, quickly storing the test kits in his briefcase. He had to stay focused, keeping his routine as normal as possible. Any deviation might alert Ansley. That evening, he made sure to get home early. The house was quiet. Ansley had texted that she was taking the kids to their after-school activities. Perfect timing. Samuel moved through the house with purpose, collecting samples from each child's toothbrush. But he swabbed his own cheek last, sealing each sample in its own envelope. The testing company had promised results within 2 to 3 weeks. As he drove to the post office to mail the package, his hands were steady on the steering wheel. The initial shock had settled into something else, a cold, determined focus. He thought about every sacrifice he'd made, every long workday, every decision aimed at his family's future. If Ansley thought she could take it all, she was about to learn a harsh lesson. Samuel Keene wasn't a man who accepted betrayal lightly, and he would ensure she never forgot it. The paper inside felt almost too light to hold such heavy truth. He scanned the results, and his world spun. 0% probability of paternity. He whispered the words, barely audible, then checked each child's results. Noah, Beth, Ellie, all the same. All a lie. Samuel leaned back in his chair, letting the brutal reality seep in. 14 years of memories flashed through his mind like a corrupted film reel. Noah's first steps, Beth's soccer games, Ellie's bedtime stories, all once treasured, now stained by Ansley's deceit. He reached for his phone, scrolling to a familiar contact. Cal Watson had been his friend since their wild college days, now a respected attorney who'd helped Samuel through numerous contracts. "Cal," Samuel said when his friend answered, "I need to meet today. It's important." "Something wrong with the Henderson project?" Cal asked. "No, this is personal. Very personal." After a pause, Cal replied, "My office at noon, I'll be there." Cal's office carried an air of authority, with dark wood paneling and leather chairs that creaked with age. Samuel sat across from his friend, the DNA results spread out like a battle plan. "Good God," California muttered, adjusting his glasses. "All 3 kids," Samuel nodded. "And that's not all." Leaning forward, Samuel's knuckles went white against the armrests. "I overheard her, Cal. She's planning to take everything in the divorce, the house, the assets. She's been playing me for years." Cal's jaw tightened. "Tell me everything." "Don't leave out a single detail." Samuel recounted that night in the garage, Ansley's cold words to the kids, and the silent weeks of observation that followed. Cal took notes, his pen scratching across the paper. "This is fraud," Cal said finally, sitting back in his chair. "Paternity fraud, specifically, with a clear intent to deceive you financially. We've got a solid case." "I want everything, Cal. The house, the assets. I want her to walk away with nothing." Cal looked hard at his friend. "This won't be easy. She'll fight, probably claim you're abandoning the kids you raised." "They're not my kids," Samuel cut in sharply. "They never were." That was her lie, her choice. "I won't carry the weight of her deception anymore." "All right," Cal nodded, reaching for a fresh notepad. "Here's what we're going to do." That evening, Samuel pulled into his driveway, rehearsing the confrontation to come. The house lights were on, warm and inviting. Another falsehood. He found Ansley in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. "We need to talk," he said. She turned, the knife pausing mid-slice. "Can it wait until after dinner?" Samuel laid the DNA results on the kitchen counter, his voice calm but cold. "The kids, they aren't mine." "And you've known that all along, haven't you?" Angley paled, her face draining as she set down the knife, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Samuel, I can explain." "Explain what?" he asked, his tone steady. "Explain how you deceived me for 14 years. Or maybe you'd rather explain your little scheme to take my house and assets in the divorce." "What?" "No, I never," she stammered, but a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "You were in the garage that night," he continued, stepping closer, watching her shrink back against the counter. "I heard every word. Your whole plan to use me until the kids were out of college, then take everything." Angley's shocked expression twisted into something more familiar, colder. For the first time, Samuel saw her real self as the mask slipped. "What was I supposed to do?" she snapped, a hardened edge in her voice. "You were stable, successful, the perfect target." Samuel laughed, hollow and harsh, echoing through the kitchen. That's all I was to you? A meal ticket. She sneered. You got what you wanted too, a ready-made family, respect in the community. Don't act so high and mighty. I'm filing for divorce, Samuel replied, his voice flat. And I'm suing you for paternity fraud. You won't get a penny more than you already took. Angley's face twisted in fury. You can't do this, the kids need. They're not my children, he interrupted, slamming his fist onto the counter. She jumped back. That was your choice, your lie, your consequence. Stop being petty, she spat, after everything we built. Everything I built, he corrected. Everything you schemed to take. Well, your scheme is over. I've frozen the joint accounts and my lawyer will be in touch. He turned to leave, but her voice halted him. They love you, Samuel. They don't know any different. Are you really going to punish them for my mistakes? Samuel glanced back, seeing the manipulation in her pleading expression. You should have thought of that before making them part of your con. He walked out, heading upstairs to the guest room where he'd been quietly moving his essentials. Her desperate calls followed him, but they meant nothing now. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Marcy, just checking in. You okay? He quickly replied, need to talk. Can you meet tomorrow? Always. Breakfast at Joe's, 8 a.m. He sat on the guest bed, listening to Angley moving around downstairs. The kids would be home soon, he'd avoid them, letting Angley explain her own lies. His phone buzzed again. Cal's message papers will be ready tomorrow. First hearing next week. You sure about this? His reply was immediate. Never been more sure. He laid back, staring at the ceiling, letting the truth sink in and harden his resolve. Angley wanted war. He'd give her annihilation. The next morning, Samuel arrived early at Joe's diner, choosing a booth in the back with a view of the door. Marcy arrived at 8, punctual as always. She took one look at his face and froze. Oh God, she said, sliding into the booth. What happened? He waited until the waitress left before handing over the DNA results. Angley's been lying about everything. Marcy read the papers, her expression darkening. I knew something was off about her, but this. There's more, he said, telling her about the overheard conversation in the garage, the kitchen confrontation. By the time he finished, her coffee was cold. I'll kill her, Marcy declared, hands shaking. I'll actually kill her. I need your help, but not for murder. Cal's building the case, but I need to protect my assets. You have power of attorney since Dad died. I need you to help me lock everything down. Marcy gripped his hand. Whatever you need. We'll ruin her, legally, but completely. For the next hour they plotted, her organizational skills as valuable as Cal's legal expertise. Walking to their cars, Marcy added, the community needs to know. Not just about the kids, but about her. Be careful, he warned. Everything must be legal. Trust me, she replied, smiling grimly. The truth will be enough. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and financial maneuvers. Samuel moved into a temporary apartment, leaving Angley in the house until the court date. She tried calling, texting, even showing up at his office, but he maintained his silence. The children's confusion hurt, but he stayed firm. This wasn't about them, it was about justice, about consequences for years of calculated betrayal. Finally, the hearing day arrived. Samuel sat beside Cal in the courtroom, watching Angley and her lawyer take their seats. Dressed conservatively, she looked the part of the devoted mother. Your Honor, her lawyer began. My client has been an exemplary mother for 14 years. Mr. Keane's sudden abandonment. Objection, California interjected. This case involves documented paternity fraud and financial deception. The judge nodded, prompting Cal to present the evidence. He detailed DNA results, financial records, and finally the piece de resistance. Your Honor, Cal said, producing a document, I'd like to submit this sworn affidavit from Mr. Liam Vargas. Angley's audible gasp filled the courtroom. The affidavit confirmed that Vargas was the biological father of at least one child, and that Angley had deceived Samuel for financial gain. Her lawyer's attempts at damage control failed under the weight of the evidence. 2 hours later, it was over. The judge ruled that Samuel would receive the house and most assets. Angley would have limited custody and no financial support beyond necessary child care. Outside the courtroom, Angley grabbed Samuel's arm. "Please," she begged. "Can we work something out for the kids?" Samuel shook her hand off. "You planned this. You destroyed my life for your gain. Now you live with the consequences." He walked away, flanked by Cal and Marcy, leaving her alone in the corridor as her sobs echoed behind them. He didn't look back. After 14 years, she wouldn't get a second more. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through Samuel's home office as he examined the finalized divorce papers, confirming the house was now legally his. The abrupt sound of a car door slamming outside caught his attention. He looked out the window to see Ansley standing in the driveway, her designer handbag contrasting sharply with her frazzled appearance. His phone buzzed with a text from Cal. "She's not supposed to be there. Want me to call the police?" "Not yet," Samuel replied. "Let's see what she does first." The doorbell rang, followed by persistent knocking. Samuel took his time walking downstairs, each step slow and deliberate. When he opened the door, Ansley shoved her way inside, waving a stack of documents in his face. "You can't do this," she shouted. "These support calculations, they're impossible. How am I supposed to keep up the children's lifestyle?" Samuel shut the door calmly behind her. "Maybe you should have thought of that before using them as pawns in your plan." "They're not pawns," her voice cracked. "Their children are children." "No," he replied, his tone cutting through her protests. "They're your children, your lies, your responsibility." "The court can't just erase 14 years of you being their father," she argued. Samuel's voice stayed steady. "The court has everything it needs: the DNA results, Liam's affidavit, and all the proof of your little scheme to take everything I've built." He stepped closer, watching her step back. "How does it feel, Ansley, watching your plan crumble?" "Liam had no right to tell," she blurted. Samuel let out a dry laugh. "Quite the shock, isn't it? Your ex-boyfriend suddenly discovering a conscience after all this time." Her face reddened. "He's lying about me planning it." "I never." "Save it for your lawyer." Samuel opened the door. "Now get out of my house." "Samuel, please," she said, softening. "We can work something out for the kids." "The kids you used as weapons? The ones you taught to deceive me?" Samuel's calm shattered, his voice rising. "Get out." "Dad." Both turned to see Noah standing on the sidewalk, backpack slung over his shoulder, his face filled with confusion and pain. "Noah," Ansley began, stepping toward him. "You shouldn't be here." "Why not?" Noah's voice trembled. "This was my home too. Before you ruined everything." Samuel watched the boy he'd raised, who he had loved as his own, face the harsh truth. Ansley reached for him. "Sweetheart, it's complicated." "No," he took a step back. "It's not. You lied. You used us." He looked at Samuel, his face crumpling. "Now, I don't even know who I am." Samuel felt the familiar ache in his chest, the pain of loving children he had to let go. He kept his expression neutral. "Noah," he said quietly, "you should go with your mother." He looked at Ansley. "But he's right." Ansley quickly redirected. "Come on, Noah. We need to pick up your sisters from practice." Shoulders slumped, Noah turned to the car without another word. Ansley lingered on the doorstep. "This isn't over," she warned. Samuel held her gaze. "Yes, it is. You're just refusing to see it." He shut the door, waiting until he heard her car drive away before releasing a long sigh. His phone buzzed again, a message from Marcy. "Just checking in. Still on for dinner?" "On my way," he replied. "Could use the distraction." Marcy's kitchen was always a safe haven, filled with the comforting smell of home-cooked meals and the warmth of unconditional support. Tonight she had prepared his favorite pot roast with root vegetables, just like their mother used to make. Noah showed up at the house, Samuel said, pushing his food around his plate. Marcy set down her fork, concerned. "How'd that go?" "As you'd expect," he replied, sharing the details of the encounter and the hurt the kids felt. Marcy finished his sentence. "But it's not your job to fix what she broke." He managed a faint smile. You know what Mum would say about all this? She'd say you can't build happiness on lies. Marcy paused, and she'd say Ansley needs a swift kick in her manipulative self. Samuel laughed as she refilled their wine glasses. Did you hear the latest? Karen from my book club saw Ansley at the grocery store. Apparently she's telling everyone you're unstable and making up stories about the paternity fraud. Samuel chuckled, shaking his head. Let her try. The DNA tests and Liam's affidavit tell the truth. Marcy hesitated. Did you ever find out why Liam came forward? Cal did some digging. Turns out Ansley tried to shake him down for child support last year, threatening to tell his wife if he didn't pay. She got greedy, Marcy replied, raising her glass. To justice. To truth, he added, clinking his glass against hers. The next morning, Samuel arrived at his office early, determined to immerse himself in work, but an urgent email from Cal disrupted his plan's emergency meeting. My office, 10 a.m. Ansley's trying something. When he arrived, he found Cal pacing, his desk cluttered with documents. She filed an appeal, Cal said. She's claiming new evidence of emotional abuse and financial control. Samuel shook his head in disbelief. That's absurd. Of course it is, Cal replied, sinking into his chair. But she's desperate. She's also challenging the paternity fraud ruling, claiming she truly thought you were the father. Samuel's laugh was bitter. After Liam's affidavit, after what she told the kids. Cal flipped through the papers. Her case is flimsy, but she's hoping to drag this out, wear you down, maybe make you settle just to get it over with. That's not happening. I know. Cal's expression turned steely as he slid a document across the desk. This is a detailed record of every cent you spent on those kids' education, healthcare, activities minus 14 years of financial support based on lies. If she wants a fight, we'll countersue for every dollar. Samuel studied the numbers. This would ruin her. That's the idea. Cal leaned forward. She's counting on you backing down, showing mercy for the kids. Prove her wrong. Without hesitation, Samuel signed the countersuit. No mercy for manipulators. In the following weeks, Samuel's patience was tested. Ansley launched a social media campaign portraying herself as the victim of a vindictive ex. Some mutual friends chose sides, and Samuel cut ties with those who bought into her narrative. But then, things shifted. Liam's wife, Sarah, fed up with Ansley's attempts to contact her husband, released emails proving Ansley's blackmail attempts. Other men even came forward, suggesting they might be the fathers of her other children. Ansley's carefully curated image unraveled further with each new disclosure. The appeal hearing was brief, with the judge visibly frustrated by Ansley's attempts to sway the court, rejecting her claims and upholding the original decision. Samuel's countersuit for financial compensation was approved. Outside, reporters gathered, eager for details about the scandal shaking their suburban community. Samuel walked past them, ignoring their questions until Ansley's voice called out. Heartless. Samuel's voice rang clear in the quiet hallway. You're calling this heartless after everything you did? I made mistakes, yes, but she stammered. Mistakes? Samuel stepped closer, his voice sharp but controlled. You knowingly had children with other men, lied to me, lied to them, and to everyone else for 14 years. You schemed to take everything I built. Those weren't mistakes, Ansley, they were choices, your choices. I loved you, she murmured. Samuel's expression turned cold. No, you loved what I could offer. There's a big difference. He turned to walk away, but her next words halted him. What about the kids' college funds? Their future? He faced her once more. You should have thought about their future before involving them in your deceit. Every consequence you're facing now is because of your actions, not mine. He turned away, Cal and Marcy joining him as they walked down the corridor, while Ansley's sobs echoed behind them. Samuel didn't look back. His lawyer would manage any future contact. 3 months later, Samuel sat on his back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The house felt quieter now, emptier, but also lighter, rid of the weight of deceit that had burdened it for so long. Marcy joined him, bringing 2 beers. A penny for your thoughts. Just thinking about changes, he replied, accepting the beer. A year ago, I thought I had everything set: family, future, purpose, and now ... now I see the truth about Ansley, and about myself. He took a long sip. Did you know she tried to reach out again, this time through Beth's dance teacher of all people? Marcy's eyes narrowed. What did she want? The usual, he replied. Forgiveness, understanding, a chance to explain it all this time. His laugh held no bitterness, only resolve. I told the dance teacher the same thing I've been telling everyone. I don't want explanations or excuses. Ansley made her choices, now she's living with the results. And the kids? Marcy asked gently. They're not mine, Samuel said firmly. That's the truth Ansley tried to keep hidden, but the truth, it matters more than any comforting lies. They sat in silence, watching as the sky shifted from gold to deep purple. Finally, Marcy spoke. You know what Mum would say about all this? Samuel smiled. That the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, and probably that it's good riddance to bad rubbish. Marcy clinked her bottle against his. To new beginnings. To truth, Samuel answered, his voice steady and certain, no matter the cost. The sun set on his reclaimed home, casting long shadows over the yard where children once played, yet Samuel felt no regret, no doubt. He had met betrayal with determination, fought deception with honesty, and come out victorious. The life he thought he'd built might have been a lie, but his future would rest on stronger foundations: integrity, self-respect, and the unwavering certainty that he had refused to let deceit overpower truth. As night settled in, Samuel smiled. He was finally free.